All right, welcome to this episode. I'm your host, Xiao, principal on the venture investing team here at Mark 49. Today, we have the honor to have Tony Sun from GC Ventures. Welcome, Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Xiao. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Tony, we have known each other for a long time, right? So you have almost a decade of experience in the CVC space. Let's start with some introductions of yourself, please.
Yeah, thanks. So this is Tony speaking. So director of CVC at GC International. So we are basically operate and runs the corporate venture function for a company called PDD Global Chemical, or GC in short. The company is a chemical company out of Thailand, but we have global footprint. And personally, I'm responsible for our North American CVC activities for the past few years. And material science by training. I spent a few years in consulting and been doing CVC since a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I worked with many CVC arms, right? So the first question, this is just a general chat about, the industry, right? So the first question I ask any, CVC team, and this is not just for GC. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the whole industry, right? Any CVC, there's a North Star, right? What's your goal here? What's your, are you more strategic or are you more financial or are you doing both? How do you balance that? Or what's your view on this, from the general CVC, perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I think that's a great question. I don't think I have the crystal ball to say, but I can share what I observed from from peers. I think in a nutshell, I think each CVC is structured very differently, and they have all their own ways how to see it, and depends on ultimately what's the intention why they need to have CVC, and also that's not just one answer. From my observations, even in the past decade I've been in the industry, the answer to that question evolves over time, depends on how the corporate senior executives understand the space, how the team evolves, and also how they see also that goes along the broader market. But at the end of the day, because of CVC, they're almost by given there's always some strategic angle. And for different corporations, they may define it either in the short term, like bring technology in the house now, today, in the next 2 or 3 years, or something more like a long shot. Let's say we are really trying to create a new business that can potentially disrupt itself in the longer term. So that's kind of how we see things goes very differently based on the actual need.
Yeah, absolutely. From my perspective, right? So I've seen, there's not a single CVC that's not having a strategic angle, right? So maybe there's some other kind of already separate, CVCs that actually it's not really taking that into account. But definitely, but how do you say sort of the right balance of that with the financial angle? We're a VC vehicle after all, right? How do you balance that? And sometimes, from my personal observation, some of the top executives from the corporations are more kind of thinking this is more like a strategic play. Do you agree or disagree? What's your view on that?
I think it's not a either or question. It's always a both and question. I think for each different CVCs and the background of corporate, they are kind of being placed at a different balance. Some companies have a higher tolerance on the financial side, but some of the other does not. But I would say from most what I have here is financial is always the backbone, and that's always essential and also survival questions, typically after year 3 when the team is founded. I think for the first 3 years, even if the senior executive does not question the CVC team leaders on the financials, after that honeymoon or 3 years of honeymoon pass, that question always comes up because that's when we start to see portfolio company triage, and we as a CVC function we need to consider which one to support, and a lot of time there's also accompanied with, let's say, corporate structure change, reorganization, senior executive change, and also market cycles. So that I would say financial is definitely is needed. I think the goal I would say for different corporations, some corporations have very high tolerance of that. So basically, as long as you hire the WAC, you're good, right? But also there are other things like, all right, we need the financial return to be benchmarked to certain things. And then there are also some CVCs that I've seen are a little more financial driven. They operate independently and they behave and they're incentivized almost like a pure financial VC. So I think there's different flavors.
Yeah, that's good. So now let's actually talk about the other aspect, which is equally important, is the talent, right? So I've seen many sort of team compositions, at different CVCs. I've seen people that are actually hired from the mothership, right? So they've been there for 10 years, 15 years, and they're actually directly, they know all this business units, and then they have done, other sort of relevant positions. They're hired to the CVC team. On the other side, I've seen others that are actually hired externally. So what's your view in terms of the talent composition of a dream team, and then how do you think we can attract them?
That's a real good question. The way I'm seeing CVC, a good CVC, there's needs to be probably 4 or 5 different pillars, like skill sets of pillars. I think the first is investment. So I'm basically have that investment mindset, how to do actual transactions. The second is what I call is a business development, because a lot of time you need to need to deal with a lot of internal business units, try to drive those conversations. The third is always operation. So a lot of times CVC, even within corporate, is almost like small startup on its own. It has a lot of it because it's just behave very differently from the rest of corporations. So there needs to be a lot of operation experience, like how to even start up itself. And the last is combination of tech scouting and strategy, because a lot of time these are just needed in order to do this function well and serve those things properly. So for me, that's like a necessary pieces in different teams, because based on the resources, these skill sets may be concentrated in one person, and those are really high quality talent that really hard to find. A lot of time you see these skill sets show up in different person. So that's kind of how we see the best way is really how you can put one talent or a group of talent that can check all those boxes together to make effective and efficient.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So for example, there's this function, let's call that CVBD, right?
Yeah.
So that person, from my perspective, it's usually, well, first of all, it's very much needed in my opinion on any CVC, right? And also that person usually it's actually the liaison between business units and also the CVC team and also the startup companies, right? So then let's actually also talk about the I guess how do we attract them, right? So I know many former CVC friends that actually left and they actually joined financial VCs. And what's your, let's say, Mark, for you and I, we have this magic wand question. If you can actually wave this magic wand to change anything, just one thing, what's that, right? And why?
Yeah, I think that's a hard question. I'll try to address it slightly differently. I would say is I want to look at this from a different angle. So it's less about what corporate VC can offer. It's more about what talent want to see, right? What they want to get. I think let's face it. I think we all want to have do something that is being valued, and that is something we can do well, and also something we like, right? I think for me that's kind of like a 3 criteria for it to incentivize talent. So basically, from talent perspective, they want to see something that number one, it's always and also is a compromise, right? It's really hard to check all the 3 boxes. It will be some triangle and triangulation of the 3. So basically, something that let's say if I'm the talent that we're talking about, something that I can do well, right? I can do it efficiently and effectively, and also can I find something that I also like a lot, right? Which I can enjoy just being part of that. That's like the calling for my life or for my career. And then the third is how I'm being evaluated. So compensation is a big part of that. But other than compensation, there are also other pieces. How people can feel being valued. So now changing the topic to the other side. So as a corporate, I think when we try to find good talent, we try to make sure that it's a balance between the 3. We want to find the talent with the proper skill sets. That's what they can do, and also they enjoy doing this, right? And so that they can be with us along. And also how we can do our best to proper compensate them as much and value them properly. Let's say, and as I mentioned, it's not just one thing compensation; it's a combination of different things, so that they're feeling being valued. I think admittedly, right? So if we're talking about, let's say, across different market sectors, so it's just not really, if you're looking at the margins of these different industries, it's really hard to have a high margin industry, to have a low margin industry offer as purely on compensation as competitive as high margin industries. It's just not realistic. However, we're still seeing people in those industries. Why? Because they are being valued in different ways. they can see that they can contribute and they change the world and they have shown the impact. So that's kind of how we see this. And yeah, so that's we hopefully we can do a better to compensate them even better, but that's kind of how we see the problem.
Yeah, I mean, well, thanks for that, right? So from my perspective, I'm definitely seeing that's actually changing for the better now, right? So in terms of some data there, I see here and there, and then also people I know, right? So now let's actually switch to another topic, which is IC or investment committee, right? So maybe walk us through the decision-making process at a typical CVC. What is an IC, and then how is the decision made?
Yeah, I think again, each corporate has their own way. But overall, what I'm seeing is most CVC I spoke with, they have like between an IC member between 3 people to 5 people, 6 people. Sometimes like that's like the vast majority of people. And then what I'm hearing and seeing from industry is there has been these trends over the past few years that is moving towards a more flexible decision process. So and then there's also a trend of separate the investment decision and the business case decision. So I think in the past, those decisions are intertwined together, and which will cause unnecessary delays, this or that. But in recent years, I think it's becoming much clearer. I think, again, there has been a professionalization of the CVC team members, and also those knowledge has been transferred to senior executives, the IC members. So this is kind of how I'm seeing, that's kind of how I'm seeing the industry moving. As for specific IC members, the most common names I'm hearing, so for example, like CTO, Chief Innovation Officer, CFOs, Chief Strategy, business unit owner, sometimes CEO as well. So I think it's a lot of time it's a combination of these people.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So last question I have here is on the decision-making process, right?
Mm.
So, I know many CVC friends, there's data suggesting it takes a longer time for any typical CVC to make an investment decision. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. Is that true? And then what's the reason? How do we address that? And then is that kind of perceived as a bad thing on the street by entrepreneurs? Because the sort of the intertwined question here is working with the CVC. There's this hope to work with the business units behind the CVC there, right? So kind of trying to put all of this together.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a good question. I think there has been this misconception of CVC is slow. They drag things out. I would think if you're looking back purely from, let's say, the first conversation to when people write a check, because corporate CVC typical structure different way, so it takes a little longer. I think that's a fact. However, we want to differentiate that from, is it long because of good reason or is long because of bad reason? So I do want to differentiate this. So what do I mean by a good reason is because I think CVCs typically do a more thorough due diligence than some of the financial VCs I'm seeing. I'm not seeing all of them are doing that, but that's my observation. So it's actually they are doing much thorough analysis. They're actually involving their internal teams doing evaluation. And let's say just shipping samples takes time, right? So this is kind of like just naturally delays it. So this is why I think this is kind of long for good reason. They also long for bad reason. So for example, I have not me, but certain CVC, let's say they have 6 different IC members, sits in 5 different continents. And all right, it's really tough to schedule IC meeting. And all right, I need 6 weeks to schedule the next available slot. So everyone's sitting here doing nothing for 6 weeks until they receive. That's a delay for bad reason. I think for CVC to really improve, we will probably want to remove like the bad reason long, but still continue to do the good thorough due diligence work. And also this kind of also goes back to your other side of the question. So is this really? I think it's a question for the entrepreneurs or CEOs to make the call. Is it worth the risk of waiting a few weeks longer for that decision? Because there's a value of it. I think the entrepreneurs fully understand having a strong corporate backing from early on and have it validated what it means to the market. So I think that's always this, nothing comes in free. That's the if the entrepreneur thinks it's worth it, I think this just unfortunately, if it's really a long process, they better to be prepared for it And I also have always have plan B to back it up. In case, you wait long and then it goes to nothing, what's your backup plan? So I think these are the things for entrepreneur to think about ahead of time.
Yeah, thank you. That's very insightful. And also kind of back to the other question I was asking you about having this the best practice of an IC being lean, being similar time zones, and also the availability definitely plays a role. Sounds like when it comes to decision-making process. So I think that I'm done with all my questions. Tony, what are you investing in, right? So what kind of stages and companies are you investing in? Let us know.
Yeah, sure. I think for us, as I alluded earlier, we typically look at early stage. But early stage does not really mean anything nowadays. It can mean big checks, small checks. But I think for us, how we look at the problem is mainly from how close to our business need and also the timing of the technology. And I think within GC, we have different pockets that we can do different transactions, whether it's small check CVC, medium-sized CVC or project or M&A. There's so many different tools. So I would say for us, we are always open to have conversations and figure out if there's good technology that has a strong synergy and also we see the financial uptake. I think we will figure out how we make the transaction happen.
Okay, awesome. Thank you again, Tony. It's a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Take
All
care.
right, take care.